everybody, today I'm going to be reading Chapter 15 of the Enola Holmes mystery, The Case of the Missing Marquess. Chapter the 15th. Quite aside from accompanying Tweaky, I can't speak today. I had my own errand at Scotland Yard. "This is lovely," explained Tewkesbury, scanning London from the hansom cab as the horse trotted along, harness jiggling, directly in front of us. I paid attention only to my own thoughts. Something needed to be done about Cutter and Madame Layla. Ciebio de la Papa. Astropredation. I had no proof. But the more I turned matters over in my mind, the more I considered they might be involved in a kidnapping ring together. Inference, she had told him about me. Who else would have done so? The lodgekeeper, the Duchess, her maids? Most unlikely. All of those whom I had encountered at Bayswater Hall. Only Inspector Lestrade and Madame Layla had heard me describe the whereabouts of Lord Tewkesbury. Only of those two had contacted Cutter to have him wire Squeaky to take Tweaky prisoner. Surely it had not been Lestrade. Conclusion: it must have been Madame Layla. Tweaky said, "I never understood why they put the driver way up top in the back, so far from the horse. Now I see. It is so that nothing obstructs one's view." I murmured, continuing my dark thoughts of Madame Layla. While appearing to be on the side of the angels, the woman had actually aligned herself with the devils. Cutter and Squeaky. They kidnapped a victim I conjured, and then Madame Layla was called in for her dubious services, so that while Cutter and Squeaky collected ransom, Madame Layla was paid handsomely for her spiritual insights into the missing person's whereabouts. They all profited, and they were all in their foul business together. In Tweaky's case, although initially he had run away, Cutter and Squeaky had seized the opportunity to kidnap him afterward. While unsure how to notify the authorities without putting myself in jeopardy, I knew I had to do something to put a stop to this villainy. Tweaky said, "How pleasant is it to feel the wind in one's face on a hot day. Annoying boy, must he chatter like a magpie?" Without replying, lips pursed together, I reached into a skirt pocket and pulled out a pencil and a folded piece of paper. Hastily and rather angrily, laying the paper in my lap, I sketched an exaggerated portrait of a man. When Tweaky saw what I was doing, he ceased his chit-chat to stare. "That's Cutter," he said. Without comment, I finished the likeness. "That is Cutter, right down to the hair in his ears." He astonished me. "How do you draw like that?" Without answering, I turned over the folded paper. On the fresh surface, I sketched another person. Because I found myself in the proper frame of mind, raw and energetic, I was able to do so without hesitation, without conscious memory, without thought. The pencil strokes coming swiftly to hand from some source deep within my mind. "Who's that?" Tweaky asked. Again I did not answer, finishing the portrait of a large, imposing woman. I unfolded the paper and looked at both sketches at once. The character man and the character woman stood side by side. At that moment I knew. Of course, to be with a woman, all that was necessary was to put on false hair, various patient amplifiers, enhancers, improvers, and regulators, and all the necessary concealments. Dress, hat, gloves. I of all people should know. Tweaky saw too, he whispered. "It's the same person." The bright red wig I thought to hide the hairy ears and distract attention from the face, and the enhancement of the lips, eyelashes, and eyes, easy enough face paint. No respectable lady would ever admit to the use of such artifice. But I had heard it was done. Not that this person was either respectable or a lady. Tweaky demanded, pointing from one drawing to the other, "If that's Cutter, then who is that?" I told him, although the name meant nothing to him, Madame Leila Sibio de la Fopopo. I don't care if you're the Prince of Wales, said the surgeon at the desk without so much as lifting his eyes to take a look at us. You'll wait your turn like everybody else. Have a seat. His gaze still on the paper and the blotter, he flapped a meaty hand toward the hallway beside him. I smiled at Tweaky, who, having just introduced himself as Viscount Tewkesbury Basilweather, seemed inclined rather either to laugh or cry. I'll wait with you, I whispered, and somehow in course of our visit to Scotland Yard I would accomplish my own business there. As I had ridden my bicycle away from Cranford, the best planned now seemed not to plan. Tweaky and I sat on one of the many benches along the dark wood-paneled passageway, benches of singularly admin up benches, rickety worse than any church pews I had ever experienced. Perched beside me, Tweaky muttered, "You're really lucky with all that padding." What a shocking thing to say. Hush. Don't tell me to hush. Tell me who you are. No. I kept my voice down, for all along the passage, on the other benches, waiting to speak with the police, intent on their own conversations and problems. However, none of them had given us a second glance. Tweaky had the same sense to lower his voice. But you've saved my life maybe, or at least my honor, and you've done so much for me. I want to thank you. Who are you? I shook my head. Why do you want to look like an old maid, shocking boy? Do you mind your tongue? Shocking girl. Am I never to learn your name? Shh. No. I hope not. But I did not say no. Instead, I said hush again. Gripping his arm, for just down the passageway from us a door was opening, and I saw a familiar man stepping out. Two familiar men. For a moment I truly felt as if I might faint, not to do to any corseting either. Heaven help me. One of them was Inspector Lestrade, but I had realized, dedicated to the company of Tweaky into Scotland Yard, that I might encounter Lestrade. I felt sure he would not recognize me as the black-veiled widow he had briefly met at Basilweather Hall. No, what made me weak with alarm was the sight of the other man, Sherlock Holmes. Mentally, I willed myself to keep breathing, to sit naturally, to blend in with the dark woodwork in hard bench, and the framed etchings on the walls, the way a hen partridge blends with a brush. Please, they must not notice me. If either of them recognized me, my few days of freedom were over. Slowly they paced towards us, deep in conversation, even though my brother stood so much taller than the ferret-like Lestrade that he had to stoop to put his head close to the lesser man's. After my first startled look at them, I turned my eyes to my lap, let go of Tweaky, and hid my clenched, quivering hands in the folds of my skirt. Can't make head nor tail of this Basilweather case, came Lestrade's silent voice. I do wish you would have a look at it, Holmes. Holmes? Yes, Tweaky, sitting bolt upright at my side. Is that him, the famous detective? I whispered. Do please hush. I am sure he heard strong emotion in my voice, for he actually obeyed. Sherlock was saying to Lestrade, not nearly as fervently as I would assign more officers to finding my sister. My brother's voice, well in tone, sounded as taut as a violin string. Something in his voice, something unspoken, made a butterfly of emotion painfully in my heart. I would like to, my dear fellow, sympathy in great Lestrade's voice, but also a note. I thought of gloating, however. If you cannot give me more to work with. The butler confirms that mother has no portraits taken of herself or Enola for 10 years or more. Confound the woman. Well, we have that sketch your sister drew of her. Unmistakably, I heard a glint of glee in the Scotland inspector's voice. My brother's hand shot out and caught him by the arm, halting him. The two of them stood directly in front of Tweaky and me. Thanks perhaps to Providence, perhaps blind luck, Sherlock stood with his back to me. Look here, Lestrade. My brother did not sound angry exactly, but his tone, nearly hypnotic in its intensity, made my heart swell with admiration for him. and commanded the other man's fullest equation. Sherlock told him, "I know you think it's a great blow to my pride that both my mother and my sister have gone missing. I cannot find a trace of the former, and I have you to thank for the information of the latter, but I assure you," Lestrade interrupted, blinking, his gaze sliding to one side, I have thought nothing of the sort. Bosh! I am not blaming you for being no worse than your betters." Brushing aside the perplexing statement with one black-gloved hand, Sherlock rested the inspector anew with his glaive. "But, Lestrade, I want you to understand. You may cross with Lady Adore Burnett Holmes off your list. She knew what she was doing, and if she has come in harm's way, she has only herself to blame." Pain roused in my heart again. Not a butterfly ache, but a pain of a different sort. At the time I did not know of my brilliant brother's one crippling weakness. I did not understand how melancholia might make him utter such harsh words. However, Enola Holmes is a different matter entirely. Sherlock was saying, "My sister is an innocent, neglected, uneducated, unsophisticated, a dreamer. I feel much at fault for not staying on with her, instead of leaving her to the care of my brother Mycroft. Despite his fine hand, he has no patience. He could never understand that it takes time, not just to harness, to train a colt." Of course the girl bolted, having more spirit than intelligence. Underneath my false bangs and my pince-nez I scowled. "She seemed intelligent enough when I spoke with her," said Lestrade. "She certainly deceived me. I would have sworn she was 25 at least. Poised, well-spoken, thoughtful." My scowl smoothed away. I quite approved of Lestrade. My brother started. Thoughtful and imaginative, perhaps, but certainly no stranger to the weakness, irritably, of her sex. Why, for instance, did she tell the lodge-keeper her name? Perhaps out of sheer daring to get in. She was sensible enough afterward to take herself straight away to London, where it would be very difficult to find her, where anything could be happening to her, even if she were 25, and she is only 14. Whereas I was saying earlier, anything could be happening to a young person of yet more tender years, the Duke of Baslewether's son. At a moment which Tweaky cleared his throat and said "Ahem," and stood up. So you see, I had no choice to think, and it seemed to me at the time no choice. I fled, as the inspector and the great detective turned to gawk at the commonly clad boy. As they blinked and stared, as recognition dawned, I stood up and quietly walked away. I got only a glimpse of my brother's face, and I had known how rare a treat it was to see Sherlock Holmes so astonished. I would have enjoyed the moment longer, but I did not linger. Just took a few steps down the hallway, opened the first door that presented itself, went in, closing the door softly behind me. I found myself in an office with several desks, all of them empty but one. "Excuse me," I said to the young constable, who raised his head from his paperwork. "The sergeant wants you at the front desk." In all likelihood assuming I was recently employed at the yard, the shorthand transcriber or something of the sort. He nodded, got up, and went out. I went out also, by the window. Lifting the sash, I hopped over the sill as if mounting a bicycle, alighting on the pavement, as getting off on the other side. There were people passing, of course, but without any glances at any of them, as if it were perfectly normal to exit a public building in this manner. I removed my pince-nez and tossed it to the street, where a large horse promptly trod upon it. Standing straight, I walked away briskly, as befit a young professional woman. At the corner, an omnibus was just stopping. I got on, paid my fare, took a seat among many other Londoners upon the roof, and did not look back. Likely my brother and Lestrade were still questioning Tweaky as the big bus trundled me away. However, I knew it would not take them long to pick up my scent. Tweaky would tell them how he and a girl dressed like a widow had escaped Cutter's boat together, a girl named Holmes. Probably by now Tweaky had turned to me, expecting to introduce me, but find nothing but 2 sketches. I hoped Lestrade, after talking with Tweaky, might realize the significance of the sketches. 2 characters lying on the bench, along with 2 hideous green parcels. I rather regretted having to leave Tweaky so abruptly without a farewell. But it could not be helped. I had to find Mum. I also regretted very much not have been able to spend more time with my brother Sherlock, even if only in disguise, to look at him, to listen to him, and admire him. I actually missed him, with yearning in my heart as if I were a ladybird. Ladybird and I wanted to fly home, but my famous detective brother did not care to find Mum. Confound him. All of my fluttering feelings about him folded their wings and settled into heartache. Although perhaps it was just as well. Sherlock and Mycroft would have wanted Mom back in Ferndale Hall, but obviously she did not wish to be there. When I found her, I would ask of her nothing that might make her unhappy. I was not seeking her in order to take away her freedom. I just wanted to have a Mum. That was all. To be in communication with her. Maybe meet now and then, to chat over a cup of tea. To know where she was. Although one could not help fearing, at the back of one's mind, that she had come to harm, still I imagined it more likely that Mum had taken herself someplace where there were no corsets, no bustles, and perhaps no hats or boots, someplace amid flowers and greenery. Ironic, I thought, that I following her example in making my escape, I had gone instead to the cesspool of a city where I had not yet seen a palace, a golden carriage, or a lady in ermine or diamonds, where I had seen instead an old woman crawling on the pavement, her head infested with ringworm. Certainly Mum would never fall to such depths, could she? I must be sure not, and I only had a few hours in which to act before the entire London constabulary would be alerted to look for me. Alighting from the omnibus at the next stop, I walked a block, and then hailed a cab. A 4-wheeler this time. For the sake of being closed in, my face unseen. Fleet Street, I told the driver. As he maneuvered through the heavy traffic of the city, I once more took the paper and pencil in my hand, composing a message. Thank you, my chrysanthemum. Are you blooming? Send Iris, please. I distinctly remembered from the meanings of flowers that the iris indicated a message. Irises in the bouquet alerted the receiver to pay attention to the meanings of the other flowers. The Greek goddess Iris had carved messages between Mount Olympus and Earth via the bridge of the rainbow. Many of the other entries in the meanings of flowers, however, I could not recall so clearly. As soon as I had found lodgings, I must be sure to obtain a copy of the book for reference. I bitterly regretted the loss of that other irreplaceable book my mother had given me. My most precious memento of her, my book of ciphers. What Cutter had done with it, I would never know. Or so I thought at the time. But I assured myself that I did not need it for any practical purpose. Again, so I thought. Taking the message I had composed, reversed it, then zigzagged it up and down into 2 lines, thus: ESAELPSIRIDNES question mark GNIMOOLBUOYERAM UMETHNASY RHCYMUOYKNAT. Then I zigzagged it up and down into 2 lines, thus: EALSRD question mark, NMOBOEAUETAY LUYRMHSGIOLUYRCMOCKAT. Then, swaying on my seat as the cab rumbled along, I reversed the order of my lines to compose my message. This I would place in the personal advertisements column of the Pall Mall Gazette, which my mother seldom missed, plus the magazine of Modern Womanhood, the Journal of the Day of Dress Reform, and the other publications she favored. My cipher ran as follows: Trails Ivy, SEPIINSGIOLUYRMM HNSRCMOCAT, Tips Ivy, EALSRDE question mark, NMOBOEUEAUTAYHYUYNH, your Ivy. I knew that my mother, who could not resist a cipher, would give this one her fullest attention when she saw it. I also knew that unfortunately my brother Sherlock, who habitually read what was called the agony columns of the newspapers, would also notice it. But as he knew nothing of the way ivy runs backwards on a picket fence, perhaps he would not decipher it. And even if he did solve it, I doubted he would understand it or connect it to me. Once upon a time, it seemed long ago, and in another world, but it was really only 6 weeks ago. Once pedaling along a country road, thinking of my brother, I had made a mental list of my talents, comparing them unfavorably with his. Now riding in a London cab instead of on a bicycle, I found myself compiling in my mind a different list of my talents and abilities. I knew things Sherlock Holmes had failed to even imagine, whereas he had overlooked the significance of my mother's bustle and her tall hat, in which I suspected she had carried quite a stout roll of banknotes. I, on the other hand, understood the structures of a lady's underpinnings and adornments. I had shown myself adept at disguise. I knew Sherlock Holmes dismissed the fair sex as irrational and insignificant. I knew of matters his logical mind could never grasp. I knew an entire world of communications belonging to women, secret codes of hat brims and rebellion, handkerchiefs and subterfuge, feather fans and covert defense, sealing wax and messages, and the positioning of a postage stamp, calling cards, and a cloak of ladylike conspiracy, which I could wrap myself. I expected that without much difficulty I could incorporate weaponry as much as defense and supplies into a corset. I could go places and accomplish things Sherlock Holmes could never understand or imagine, much less do. And I planned to. End of chapter 15.